The reservation was the worst decision I ever made, and I didn't even realize it until someone was trying to break down my door at 2 in the morning. I was 23, running on caffeine and regret, and the kind of exhausted that sleep doesn't fix. There's a specific type of burnout that settles behind your eyes and doesn't leave. I had that. I also had a past that I'd spent the better part of 2 years trying to bury. The kind of chapters you don't read aloud. I'm not going to catalog the details. What matters is that I needed distance from everything, from everyone who knew my face. Marcus, a guy from my office who microwaved salmon on Fridays and somehow remained universally liked, mentioned Kellner Island almost by accident during a slow Thursday afternoon. He described it like a man reviewing a mediocre sandwich. Tiny, off the coast of Maine, 40-minute ferry. Most visitors came for the afternoon and left before the sun touched the water. If you stayed the night, he said, you basically owned the place. That was enough for me. I found a rental listed for $60 a night, a single cottage pressed against the shoreline like it was hiding from something, available immediately. No minimum stay. The price should have made me pause. It didn't. The ferry dropped me off at 4 p.m. on a Friday in late October. I watched the island exhale its visitors over the following 2 hours. Families with strollers, couples in matching windbreakers, day trippers checking their phones as they shuffled back to the boat. By 6 o'clock, the dock was empty and the light was going amber. Then rust, then gone. The cottage was exactly as advertised and somehow worse in person. One room, a bed that groaned when you looked at it, a kitchenette with a 2-burner stove that hadn't seen use in what smelled like years. The bathroom was barely wider than my shoulders. Dense brush crowded 3 walls so tightly that branches scraped the siding. When the wind moved, which it did constantly, a low coastal breath that sounded almost deliberate. The front window faced the water through a curtain, so thin it was essentially decorative. Standing outside, you could see straight through it. The deadbolt and chain lock on the front door were new. I remember running my thumb over the shiny brass hardware, thinking it was an odd detail for a cottage this isolated. Then I let it go. I ate dinner at a pub near the ferry landing. Chowder, dark beer. The bartender had an easy smile that tightened slightly when I mentioned where I was staying. I noticed it the way you notice a car slow down on a street with nothing to slow down for. You the only one out there tonight? She asked, not quite casual. Probably, I said. That's the point. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on me a half-second longer than necessary. On the walk back, I noticed a small dock tucked inside a shallow cave-in led about 100 yards from the cottage. A single motorboat was moored there, blue hull, outboard engine, small, personal, nothing like the lobster vessels I'd seen tied up at the main dock. I filed it somewhere in the back of my mind and kept walking. I was inside by 10:30. Deadbolt, chain. I sat on the bed and tried to charge my phone. But something was wrong with the outlet or the charger, and after cycling through every plug in the cottage, I gave up. 11% battery, enough for an alarm, maybe. I told myself it didn't matter. I had my paper ferry ticket. I knew where the dock was. Sleep came faster than I expected. The exhaustion that had been accumulating for weeks pressed me flat against that groaning mattress, and I was gone inside of minutes. I don't know what pulled me back up. 1 second I was under, deep and dreamless, and the next I was staring at the ceiling with every nerve in my body tight. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:14 a.m. The room was dark except for a pale bar of moonlight through that inadequate curtain. Then I heard it. Footsteps on gravel, slow ones, deliberate, each step placed with the patience of someone who was not in a hurry, who was not passing through, who was paying attention. They were right outside the door. I held every muscle still. The footsteps stopped. The silence that dropped in their place was the kind that has weight. I counted my own heartbeats. Got to 11 before the footsteps came back. Closer this time, directly in front of the door. My throat closed. I was calculating. Door is locked. Chain is on. The window faces the water. If someone is at the door, they're between me and the brush. There's nowhere behind me but ocean. A flashlight beam cut through the curtain, swept the room, and clicked off. Then the door handle turned. Slowly. Found the lock. Held. 10 seconds of nothing. Then it turned again, harder this time, someone putting shoulder into it. Then 3 hard impacts. Not knocking, banging. The sound filled the cottage like a gunshot, and I flinched with each one. My back against the headboard, legs pulled up, making myself small. Something in my brain finally switched tracks from frozen to function. I slid off the bed and crouched beside the door on silent feet, back flat against the wall, and searching for anything useful and finding nothing. The banging stopped. Silence again. Then a voice, low and even, right on the other side of 4 inches of hollow wood. "I know you're in there, Daniel." I stopped breathing. Male, calm. A voice I had never heard before in my life, and it knew my name. The voice said my name once and didn't repeat it. I heard footsteps move away from the door, around the side of the cottage, tracking along the bathroom wall. He was circling, taking his time. My name in his mouth had done something to me that the banging hadn't. It had made everything personal, specific. This wasn't random. Someone had come to this island, to this cottage on this particular night, knowing exactly who was sleeping inside. I stayed crouched beside the door for what felt like an hour. The footsteps came and went in long arcs, sometimes close, sometimes further, near the brush. At one point they stopped for so long that I started to believe, desperately, that I'd imagined the whole thing. Then the outboard motor started, from the direction of the small cove, that blue-hulled boat. The sound built, leveled, then faded across open water until there was nothing but the shore and the wind. I didn't sleep, not a single minute. I sat in the corner of that room with a lamp on and watched the curtain until the window behind. It turned gray, then pale blue, then morning. The gravel outside the cottage when I finally opened the door told its own story. Boot prints, heavy tread, circling the building multiple times. A single clean line from the front door toward the cove, ending at the water line. Whoever he was, he hadn't come from the island. He'd come by boat in the dark straight to my rental. I returned the key without explanation, boarded the first ferry, and didn't stop moving until I was back in my apartment with every lock engaged. I spent the following week trying to dismantle it rationally. Nobody knew I was going. I'd told one person, my coworker Marcus, the one who'd mentioned the island in the first place. I went to him directly, laid out everything without softening it. He went pale in a way that's hard to fake, swore he hadn't told anyone, hadn't mentioned my name, my travel plans, nothing. I believed him. He looked genuinely frightened, which somehow made me feel worse rather than better. Here's what I keep returning to. I booked that cottage through a third-party rental site. I used my real name. I had no reason not to. It was supposed to be a quiet getaway, not a disappearing act. But if someone had been monitoring me, tracking my accounts, watching my bookings, and they would have known. The rental, the island, the dates, all of it. And then there's the other layer, the one I've already alluded to. I am not, historically, someone without enemies. There are parts of my earlier life I do not discuss, but they left certain people with certain motivations. I'd been trying to put geographic and emotional distance between myself and those years. I'd thought I was doing a decent job. I live in the same apartment now, work the same job. My name is on the same lease, the same direct deposit. If someone tracked me to a $60 cottage on an island off the coast of Maine, mapped my rental history, cross-referenced my name, put a man in a boat in the dark, then distance was never the point. Vigilance was, and I haven't been vigilant enough. That's the part that doesn't resolve. Not the footsteps, not the banging, not even my name spoken through a locked door at 2 in the morning. What stays with me, what I think about on quiet nights when I hear something outside that might be nothing, is the question underneath all the other questions. How long had they been watching before that night? I don't have an answer. I don't know that I want one, but I know this. The man with the blue boat came to that island ready. He knew my name before he knocked. He circled the cottage like someone running a pattern they'd rehearsed. And when the locks held, he left, calmly, with the engine running quiet across the water, as if he had somewhere else to be. And patient people who leave calmly don't leave permanently. They just leave for now.